Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment in our Golf Blitz Tips and Tricks series. Today we are continuing through the natural progression as we are still all caught up with the courses that came before. I've got a whole playlist if you want to go back through and check those out to make sure you haven't missed anything that's come before the map that we're looking at today. But we will be exploring Tour 14, or one of the Tours 14, specifically the Bergland Tour is the one that we'll be doing. Now, this map is a little bit different from some of the other ones that we've seen because, as a general rule, with a few exceptions, most of these courses tend to be floating in an abyss around these very odd ice-type flow structures that hover in space. So it can be a little bit more of a dangerous place to be, as your opponents may attempt to grief you a little bit more aggressively, and that can cause some problems to be sure. But we're here to explore how you can do better at those courses when and if you are confronted with them. So let's go ahead and jump into Bergland and see how well we get on. So here is a fun little tour, or toll, I guess we could say, because there's technically 3 different paths that you can take depending on what power-ups you have. Now, I'm going to demonstrate with my alt account what the first path is, and that's fairly straightforward. It's just kind of rolling down along this basin, ending up down here towards the bottom. And that's a fine route to take, but it can be a little bit stressful because you can't come into this slope right here on the left-hand side of that formation too aggressively, or you're going to have trouble. The second option that you can take, and the one that I prefer, is right here down in between this channel. And the reason that I like that option a lot is because it's a lot safer and you don't have to worry about getting bobbled around, especially if you have opponents that have grenade balls or other methods of kind of griefing your character. So that's the second option. The third option, and this is only available with a variety of different power-ups and a very limited selection at that, is going up and over the top. Now, the gooey ball, which we do have available to us now, is one of those options that you can take, and it can just kind of make your way down to the green a little bit easier and more direct. But again, you do have to be a little bit cautious with it. The only other exceptions to that can be the heavy ball or the spider ball if you have access to those, but those are some fairly advanced power-ups, so you probably won't be seeing that a whole lot. Now here's another fun little course that you can actually get an ace on if you play your cards right. As you can see down here at the very bottom, you have this berg that kind of rotates around, and this is the first instance, or one of the first instances, of acid that we see throughout the game as a whole. If your ball comes in contact with that, it is going to burn up and be destroyed, and you'll have to take your shot from the previous spot. You can circumvent it with a shield ball, but that's just kind of something you have to keep in mind. Now, what I like to do is I like to try and take a shot over here into this space at just the right time, to the point where the acid is rolled down, and just like that, you can get an ace on that hole very, very consistently. More often than not, you're going to bounce off that wall and ricochet right down into the hole, provided that you have the rotation of that berg the correct way. And again, if you have the shield ball, that is going to be a lot easier for you to do. Now, this hole is fairly straightforward as well. You'll just want to bypass the top berg and make your way down to this bottom one as best you can. And then there's a couple of different things that you can do to make your way down here. I really like waiting to take the shot down until that berg has swung over to the left, because I really like this lip that's over here that can kind of catch you and prevent you from going overboard. From there, it's just a very basic chip in to finish out the hole. Again, the heavy ball can be helpful or useful there for navigating around some of the hazards or potentially countering griefs from your opponents. So next up, we have some rotating diamonds. And again, we have a little bit more of that acid here. I've never actually run into that, so you should be fine. What you're going to want to try and do is right off the bat, you'll want to try and make your way onto this rotating diamond here. And if you can do that, then you're going to have a very easy follow-up down to the actual green down below. I know there's a lot more of those diamonds, but the more of that you can shave off, the better you're going to be. You'll just need to be cautious about the reserved gooey substance that's on those lower 2 diamonds, because there are less of it distributed on one point of it as opposed to the other. Now let's take a step back at this hole and really kind of look, because there's a couple of options that you can use to make your way down. The first 2 options are up here at the top. You can choose to go either left or right. I don't like this path on the right, and the reason why has to do with this little lip right here that's right in the center of your screen. There's not a very wide margin of error, especially if you haven't spec'd into a lot of accuracy increasing moves. So I really like taking this path down through the right hand, or not the right hand, the left hand side, to make your way down, because it's a little bit safer and a little more reliable from my experience. Now, the only other option that you can go for is up here at the top. If you happen to have the gooey ball, you can shoot over here and end up on the side border, and then you can take your shot either down towards the green or this little extra piece of groundwork that's down there with another gooey ball. If you can get an angle onto the green, that's going to be better, because you've got a lot of room to kind of safely bounce over and come to a rest to make your follow-up shot from there. Now here's another one that can be a little bit tricky, because it's very easy to get griefed up here, because you're all going to be jostling for this little position up here on this ridge. Now that's not a problem per se, because there are ways to kind of counterbalance or counteract that. So you'll just kind of need to keep your mind open as you're attacking into this area for a position, because ideally you're all going to want to make your way up here onto this gooey or sticky section of this little ice flow here. The only other option is if you have something like the gooey ball that you can use to circumvent that, you can come over here to the right, or not the right side, the left side of this stage and hook onto the wall and kind of bypass that area altogether, but you will need some extra power to make it over to the green if you take that route, should you have the resources available to do so. But apart from that, as long as you're able to work around griefing from your opponents, you should be able to close out that hole pretty easily. So here's another hole that can be pretty fun and also a little tricky. The biggest difficulty with this comes in the second shot of the hole, and that's because of this nice little bottleneck right here. Ideally, you're going to want to try and squeeze your way through that, because that comes a real pressure point and hotly contested spot for anyone who doesn't make it through there cleanly. As long as you can break through that as quickly as you can, you should be able to make your way down to the green fairly easily. This small little neck right here is a little bit of a hotly contested spot as well, but not nearly as much as the bottleneck that came before it, because that's where most of your opponents are going to get tripped up on themselves. Now, with this one, if you have a little bit of some extra power, either from a power-up or just increasing your power stat, you can bypass this first berg altogether and make your way on to the second one, which arguably is the quickest route to make your way down to this hole. From there, you're just going to want to close things off by rolling into that hole, which is fairly easy to do, all things considered, provided that you can bypass that first part. If not, you should be able to make your way from the one rotating berg to the other well enough. So here is, I believe, the last hole that we need to have a look at. And the biggest thing that you'll want to do is make sure that you get that first shot right like that, because it'll allow you to roll down and pass up having to take a secondary shot in order to make your way into the lower portions of the course. From there, you've just got this little hallway that can be a little tricky depending on your stats and whether or not your opponents have something to grief you with. More often than not, if you do get grief, you're going to end up in that water hazard, which has a longer cooldown, but it's not the end of the world if it is something that happens to you. Well, I do believe that is everything that we absolutely needed to have a look at today. So if you enjoyed today's video, make sure that you leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe for that daily variety content. and I hope to see you in the next video. If you feel like there's anything that I missed, be sure to leave it in the comment down below. Take care and have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.